But I ultimately left the education profession in college because I didn't see anybody look like me. And then one of my professors was like, when I told her I wanted to work in urban schools, she was like, well, we teach you guys enough where you don't have to work at a school like that and you can make money at like a private school or more affluent school. I was like, no, I want to work with my people. You know what I mean? Wow. So I left there and I went to communications where all the black people are at, if you had a So I ended up being a communications major. And I still caught that bug. I was a teaching assistant for a class called Black Male Development with Dr. Abercrombie. He brought in a Boy Scouts group. And that Boy Scouts group had some boys that talked about the need for more black male teachers. And I was like, I need to go ahead and become a teacher.
Get around those obstacles and make room to create opportunities. You are listening to the Around the Way podcast. And now, your hosts, Kyle King and Kiana Williams.
Welcome to another episode of Around the Way podcast, where we help you get around your obstacles and find a way to redesign your life. We are here with Mario. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing great.
How was your... Yo, you had a
That was
solid...
a good intro, actually. I got stuck on the intro. I was like, dang.
Hey, I'm Mario. Yeah. How was your weekend, man? You just got back
good.
From Dubai. Yeah. That's dope. Yeah. Talk to us about it.
I took advantage of getting my vaccine already, but it was a good, cheap flight, and I went to Dubai with one of our staff members and his partner, and I enjoyed it. I really love a lot of the things or the culture that they create in Dubai. I think one of the things I was most excited about, I was telling you, is about how, like, their leadership style. Like, I always heard about, like, Eastern tradition, but, like, actually being able to see it was really, really dope. They had a Department of Happiness, which is, like, really, really... cool.
Department of Happiness? Yeah. Talk to me about that.
Well, it really is the HR department. So I think they just changed like the title and stuff. Because I asked, like, I have a Department of Happiness? So, like, I was like, how do I become, like, the Minister of Happiness? Like, so I was asking them. But I think it's a really cool thing, though, because not only do they focus on just, like, the traditional forms of, like, HR, but, like, what creates stress, like, all of those type of things. Like, how do you create... balance in your life, all like really cool concepts that like we need to kind of adopt here in America. Everything is changing now, as we're getting, I want to say back to normal, but with, I don't know, how would y'all explain it? Like,
a new normal.
We're not post-corona
like
neither. Yeah, it's like a new normal. And so like I'm really thinking about, like, as a leader, like, how do I support my team and making sure that we come up with like different things. So I think that's the biggest thing that I took back.
So you talked about your team.
Yeah.
Talk to us, before we really dive into the weeds, talk to us about who you are, what you do, and how you're changing lives.
See, and then he has a great, like, radio voice and everything. I'm like hearing my voice. I'm like, I need to, like, go deeper so I can be able to talk better. No. So I started Profound Gentlemen, an organization that supports male educators of color. I started that with my business partner about 7 years ago now. And so we support, again, male educators of color around the country. We're based here in Charlotte.
What are middle educators?
Sorry, male educators of color.
Okay.
Yeah, so male educators of color. So we focus on black and brown teachers of color, particularly male. And our work is social emotional learning. And so we make sure that they have all of the resources to feel like they're able to step into the classroom or into principal positions, like, holistically, rather than just like focus on their title. So we do a lot of different retreats for gentlemen, and then also, obviously our retreats are online right now, and we're slowly actually about to bring them back to being in person for our gentlemen, because we're able to find a person that could do like rapid COVID tests and everything. Yeah. So obviously it costs more now. No, people are like, oh yeah, you're saving money with the business. I'm like, no, because we have to do like, all of the COVID testing. You got to get masks and we got a fogger and everything. But that's what I do full time. I love it. Our biggest goal is to retain male educators of color. So annually we've been able to retain an average of 98% of our guys. We have 600 educators in our network. So my specific job is I support our coaches that coach our teachers. So they basically make sure that they have the holistic skills and tools needed to be able to stay in this work long term and not burn out.
I love that. I love that. My nephew keeps calling me. I don't understand what's going on. It's interesting because I came from an educational background, so it's dope when you say that I'm helping the coaches coach educators, right? Because I do think that there's a disproportionate number of educators that are definitely underserved, undervalued, under-resourced. Our educational system, there's not an equal distribution of resources for our teachers. Yeah. So it's created, obviously, a negative impact on our students, which obviously has created a negative impact on our school systems, especially with Black and brown students and educators as well. So were you an educator? Could you walk me a little bit about what inspired you to get into this field?
Yeah, so what inspired me, honestly, I didn't want to become a teacher. I thought they didn't get paid enough. And I didn't have a male teacher of color. Well, actually, I didn't have a male teacher of color that saw me when I was in school. I actually did have 4 male educators of color, Black males in school. But they didn't see me for me. And they always wanted to cater to, the athletes and the typical version of what it means to be a Black boy in America and stuff. And I was like the artsy kid. I still love drawing and everything like that. So I really didn't find that connection. But then if I take it even a step further back, I think I kind of caught the teacher bug through my dad. He was a juvenile detention boot camp sergeant. And
a juvenile detention boot camp sergeant.
Yes,
that's
it's a lot.
That's a lot.
Yeah. And his department was a sex offenders department, so he was working with boys who had committed rape and everything. But he rehabilitated them and saw them in their best light and not in their worst. And I remember like going to work with him some days when my mom and my dad didn't have a sitter, and my sister and I will be playing like games with them and everything, and my dad wasn't even in the room, and it was crazy because he was able to trust them. He had that level of trust with them, and I saw how he never saw his kids that he kind of taught. As a boot camp sergeant, that was in a form of like teaching, but he never saw them based on their worst mistake. And in society, these are Black boys too that he was working with. They would have written these boys off a long time ago,
That is so interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't even think that happened enough for there to be a whole department. Like when there's boys under 7, so I guess under 18.
Under 18, that
are committing like rapes and things. I didn't even think.
I think his average was like 14, 15 years old.
14
years old.
Yep, and they was already in the system. But it was crazy because my dad, we would go to like Walmart or in Cleveland, Ohio. There's a place called Silverman's and stuff. And we will see that they'll be back into, society. He would like rehabilitate them to be able to start working back into society, and they was working at different jobs and stuff like that, and they'll talk. I remember when they used to thank my dad so much for just like him seeing them as like their best self and stuff. So it's possible when you see a kid, in their best light, you're able to help to change that. They don't have to repeat those mistakes over again, And so that's how I started it. So at first I didn't want to become a teacher, but it was just planted inside of me. And so I ended up doing Teach for America in Charlotte, 2012. That's how I moved here to Charlotte. And actually, I'll go step back. My freshman year of college, I was an education. Well, actually, in high school, I was a teaching professions major in high school. I got 5 college credits in high school to become a teacher. And then I got a scholarship from one of my teachers. She had passed. She was teaching us to become teachers. I got a scholarship from her family to go and teach, to become a teacher. But my freshman year of college, I actually, I went to the University of Cincinnati, predominantly white school, the only Black person in my cohort, the only Black male, in my cohort group. Out of all of the teachers that in this program that freshman year, I was the only Black male. So I felt isolated because in high school, in my teaching professions program in high school, everybody was black, you know? So it was like 20-something of us, you know what I mean? Learning what it means to be a teacher. It was cool, too, because I did my student teaching in my elementary school my senior year of high school. It was dope, too, because we used to go to school from 8 a.m. to only 10 a.m. every day in my senior year. What senior don't want that? And then we didn't start the student teaching until like 12:30, 1 o'clock. And then we'll end at 3. Like, what? We got 2 hours doing nothing our senior year. So yeah, that's how I started. But I ultimately left the education profession in college because I didn't see anybody look like me. And then one of my professors was like, you know, when I told her I wanted to work in urban schools, she was like, well, we teach you guys enough where you don't have to work at a school like that, and you can make money at like a private school or more affluent school. I was like, no, I want to work with my people. You know what I mean? Wow. So I left there and I went to communications where all the black people are at, if you had a So I ended up being a communications major. And I still caught that bug. I was a teaching assistant for a class called Black Male Development with Dr. Abercrombie. He brought in a Boy Scouts group. And that Boy Scouts group had some boys that talked about the need for more black male teachers. And I was like, I need to go ahead and become a teacher. So my freshman year, I was a middle school education major, and I still ended up teaching middle school, 7th grade English language arts.
Couldn't shake it.
Yeah.
That's good. I love what you said about I caught that bug. I caught that bug. It's kind of like something was continuing to pull you, whether it's your purpose, but you've even accelerated, not just catching the bug by going to teach, creating a platform for other teachers to be more equipped. Yeah. So I guess my question is, you've done all of these different things. You had this mindset that you wanted to be the representation that you didn't have. Mm-hmm. When was the time in your life where you needed representation in a specific area, but you weren't able to see it?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. It already gave me chills on a call. I'm like, well, not a call now. We're in person, which is cool. I'm not on a call. I think what's so interesting is growing up, like I mentioned earlier in my story, I feel like that the teachers didn't really have the opportunity to see me as, like, I have 4 black male teachers, but none of them saw me as me. And so I think for me as a black queer leader, going into being a black queer leader now and like leading an organization of male educators of color, which is crazy, and 600 of those, and we got a lot of type A individuals too. Growing up, I never saw black queer male leaders. You know what I mean? There was always, every movie you saw, like the black gay male was a supporter. He was like supporting that leader. He was never like the leader. And even in, you know, Dr. King's documentaries or even movies, you know, they never show Bayard Rustin, you know what I mean, who was the creator of me, you know, I mean, March on Washington, you know what I mean? So it's like, it's crazy that we don't get those we don't get those opportunities. We hide it from kids, you know, and I think I would have been able to step into my leadership a little bit stronger and more confident if I knew, you know. So I didn't get the opportunity to see that till about 25 years old, not knowing even James Baldwin and stuff and his true identity until that age as well. It took a minute, but once I figured it out, that's part of the reason why I use the word invite people into my life. I don't use the word coming out, because coming out centers the other person. It doesn't center you and your experience. And I also feel like everybody has an inviting in moment where you have to invite people in to say, this is who I really am and my most authentic self. So it doesn't seem like the only queer and LGBT kids gotta invite people in. Everybody has to invite people in, right?
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
This is good, bro. This is good. Yeah. I feel like, you know, this is especially good for me because I grew up on the other side, right? So I grew up, you know, very old school traditional parents. Yeah. That they pushed certain stereotypes, certain ideologies when it came to the LGBTQ community. Yeah. That as a adult or as a young adult, I had certain biases that I didn't even realize that I had. But it's interesting when you begin to invite others in, but also you ask for an invitation to learn or to accept, everybody.
Yeah.
So, but with that, with whether it's being invited or inviting yourself in, there were probably a lot of times where you didn't feel accepted, right? So you're a black queer leader. I like that.
Yeah.
So talk to me about those times where you needed acceptance, or you felt, I don't know, you just talk, where I'm going, right?
Yeah.
You wanted acceptance, you needed acceptance, but you weren't fully accepted for who you truly were at the core.
Yeah, what's interesting too, what I love about the inviting in moment is that you could always revoke their invitation in. That means that everybody, it's like, you don't have the privilege to actually be in my life anymore, which is dope. So everybody can't walk on you neither. And so I think for me, what's so interesting about, I guess my experience is that I don't know when I didn't have it, and I think about the reason why I did publicly invite people into my life, because you do it privately. I think that people should still do privately. Everybody who's queer does not have to be, share their sexual orientation publicly, type of thing. But the reason why I did it was so that young boys could be able to start seeing that, you know what I mean? So that they could be able to say, wait a minute, like, so he's doing this type of work, like, because normally we're just entertainers, and that's about it. So I wanted to see them to see that, hey, we're in education. So with that, I think that every table that I have not been invited to hasn't impacted me. It hasn't impacted me because I don't know, because I am at a level where I am content where I'm at and proud of where I'm at. So there's this place of where you kind of don't, I know that there's certain tables I have not been invited to because of my identity, right? And I think that's part of the conversation of acceptance, right? But I would say that probably I didn't want to be at those tables anyway. No, but I think that partially too, that it's important to, that's why cancel culture, that's a big conversation we're having right now on our team, is what is that, and why we may need to really reevaluate what cancel culture does to people when we don't allow people to actually have conversation. And I think that one of the things that we have to build is allies, right, with everything. And, because I was just telling one of our staff members, I think this is a good story. I was telling one of our staff members, there's this famous guy that talks about investments and money and stuff like that on his Instagram page. And one of our staff members, he has shared it. We have a staff like IG DM group because everybody love to share that type of stuff. So he shared it, and I was like, this information is great, but he's not speaking to me though. But I could use his information because on his page, this guy's always, if he's not talking about investments, he's bashing, LGBT folk, right? Mm-hmm. And so the staff member, he was like, well, maybe I need to unfollow this person in because, like, that's not good. I didn't even notice that. He was like, thank you for bringing it up because I don't have a lens to see that. Him as a straight black male. He said, I didn't even have a lens to even notice that, right? And I was like, well, maybe you don't unfollow him. Maybe you follow him, take everything that he's teaching, and then open up the market to be able to share it to other individuals that he's not sharing it with. Because his information is valuable, but I'm not going to be able to tap into that information that he's talking about. But if you take it as an ally, because you're able to be at that table, they're not going to be mad that you're at the table, right? And so if you take it and then share it with me, then I'm going to be good. So I think, like, there has definitely been plenty of times that, and I don't want to sound like I'm sugarcoating or beating around the bush with the answer, but I think that I focus so much on the fact that we have to raise allies who can be at that area in that space so that they can bring that information back. And the second thing is, I think that from my own perspective and my own lens, I never lost anything that has really detrimentally caused me to fall back,
So I have a question.
Yeah, go deeper if you need me to.
Yeah,
yes.
I have a lot of questions. So
yeah,
I just think that there's a lot of times, especially in, you know, as entrepreneurs, business owners, there's a certain identity that is invited to tables and is not invited to tables. And
good.
I think when we start talking about the diversity and inclusion conversation, we're trying to meet a quota and not really invite people based upon who they really are at the core and hear their ideas, hear their perspectives, and fully invite them in so that we can accept them fully, you know, as a part of our organizations or our communities or our initiatives, whatever the case may be. So this is maybe a question for me.
Yeah.
I don't know, but how can I be more inclusive as a content creator, as an entrepreneur, as a community leader, to invite people of the LGBTQ community in and, you know, be able to create safe spaces where they feel included, but they also feel wanted?
The real big answer, I think, is going to be surprising, is to know more of who you are. Because when you know more of who you are, you don't care how other people show up in a space, you know. And so it definitely goes back to you. And because for me, for example, and I wanted to bring this up too, you know, I had to get rid of so many biases of my own around the LGBT community, because how black people have to grow up. So imagine me having to get rid of my own biases of myself. Like what? But that's what we have to deal with, right? Facts. And so the more I knew about myself, the more I understand even how to not even allow. I don't like that word allow, but to extend that invitation in a sense for trans people or non-binary, because like it doesn't bother me, you know, because I know me. But oftentimes I think what I notice is that people who talk about or complain about this shouldn't happen or this shouldn't happen, you know, they are insecure about themselves in a particular way. Like, for example, they was talking about Lil Nas X video, and I thought it was so funny when they said it was like this pastor that said, like, don't have your kids watch Lil Nas X video or they'll turn gay. And Lil Nas X responded back and he said, well, I guess Megan Thee Stallion videos don't make me straight. So like, he was like, so like, what's the deal here? You know what I mean? Like that, the same concept should work, exactly. Right? Like as many straight TV shows as I watch, it didn't make me turn straight. You know, so I mean, there were no gay TV shows that I ever watched growing up. They didn't make me. And so like watching straight TV shows it didn't make me turn straight. It made me understand more of like why representation is important, you know, and why we need to increase that. I noticed that at a very young age. They're like, wow, we have this same character over and over again. I love New York Undercover and I love The Wire. Both of those shows are the same in a sense. Yeah. Exactly. You know what I mean? Both dealing with crime. The Wire is my favorite show still to this day. And that's crazy because Omar is like literally one of my he's the most complex character that has ever been created on TV. If you ever see The Wire, I don't want to spoil anything if you haven't.
Ain't seen it by now.
Yeah,
I'm pressed about it.
That is my show. Right? That's my favorite show. Season 4 is my favorite. But yeah, I think for me,
is season 4 the education?
The education.
Okay.
That was my
favorite season.
That was the bug for me right there. That was a part of like the caterpillar turning into the cocoon inside of my body. Say, okay, I need to go ahead on and like actually do this here. But yeah, I think more of learning myself, I accept other people. I'm also tired of being mad at white people, too. You know, and part of that is to understand more of me and my position. My blackness is not in opposition to their whiteness. My blackness is just because, you know, and oftentimes what I experienced over the summertime was that I was trying to be black to be like, to be like, yep, look at this, white people. And I was like, that's not healthy. You know what I mean? I want to be me to just be me. And you'll see it, everybody, you know what I mean? And that'll be fine. But I don't want to be anything to prove a point or to show somebody that look at me type of thing. That doesn't work.
So when you've done a lot of this reflecting, you know, when you've done a lot of this development or self-awareness and just kind of had these temperature checks within yourself, who are you now? How would you define the person that you are now?
I think for me right now, that's good. Because I think it has definitely evolved since this Dubai trip. You know, I think right now, if I was to give myself a title, it would be grace giver right now. I think right now it's important for me to extend a lot of grace, and it's making me feel content and at peace with myself internally. Just feeling great about just extending that to people, because oftentimes we don't extend grace, and people we need grace right now. And I was listening to a pastor yesterday. I was like, dang, it's crazy that this is a conversation about grace. And he said that in his message that, you know, we talk about grace, but many people don't experience grace. And then Kelly Price also said something about grace on the Breakfast Club, and she said, you know, people want to counsel folks until it's dumb. You know what I mean? And a way to really providing some healing is to show grace and to say that I love this quote that I'm going by with my Angelou. She says, like, I am human, therefore everything human is not foreign to me, meaning I'm capable of being able to do everything that somebody else has done. And when I recognize that I'm just as capable to murder somebody, to do all of these negative things, then who am I to truly, truly judge, right? And to be in this place of content and to be in this space of, I would say, I guess respecting myself and respecting the people around me. I think grace allows me to create more connections, allow me to also be even more creative as well, because it allows my brain to be a little bit at rest, to get bored a little bit too, because I'm not mad as much, you know? And boredom is good. Boredom is great for your brain to have a reset, you know what I mean? Oftentimes right now we're so overstimulated, we need to allow ourselves to get bored so that our minds can reset and say, okay, what do I want to be in this period of time? So yeah, grace giver would be that answer for me right now, and I just came up with that.
No, that's good, bro.
Yeah.
We're gonna go on a commercial.
Welcome back. We are here with Mario. This has been a really, really great conversation.
No, definitely.
I feel like we normally don't talk about some of the topics that have come up in this conversation, so that's good. Definitely. I feel like. I have a question for you.
Awesome.
So it's based on something that you said you said it a few times in the first half.
Yeah.
And you talked about not feeling like you were seen.
Mm-hmm.
What would that have looked like for you? Like, what did being seen look like?
That's good. Y'all ask where I'm like, I have to think about it. I feel like, you know, it's interesting. I think that I had parents that were definitely like Gabrielle Union and Dwayne Wade, like for sure. My dad is definitely like Dwayne Wade, which is so funny, and I love how they support Zaya, right? And so I think it's really interesting because I think that I shouldn't have been afraid to invite them into my life, you know, but I still was. Because of society. I don't think it was dumb. Like, I really don't think it was dumb. I think it was society. So I think what representation would look like if there were stories that I could have read that kind of already talked about it, because that would have helped me to, because it wasn't what was happening internal inside the house. It was happening according to society of like outside the home, of like, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't be that. I mean, we still went to church and we heard the fire and brimstone messages around that. So, I mean, my parents were as good as they could be with that. But I think it's really interesting because we now looking, you know, I think storytelling is important. You know what I mean? Having those type of stories is so crucial in our society to make sure that, you know, that kids, they might experience like, okay, this is dope at home, you know what I mean? But outside of my home, am I able to be myself? And I think like, yeah, the pressure was not about, the pressure didn't come from home. The pressure came from society and what society wanted me to be. I was always in leadership positions, you know, and everything. And I wasn't out in college or invited publicly invited people into my life. So it's really interesting because I was like our Black Student Union president, as well as we have a Black Males Honorary. I was the president of that. I don't think I would have been able to be the president of any of those things if I was publicly inviting people into my life. I don't, and so, but that's why I chose the position of that, because I wanted to make sure that I feel like a good benchmark of success and are we moving forward is that if I go back to my university and see somebody who is a Black queer leader in a position that I was in and being successful in it, that they would, that we would have moved forward, And so having more stories like that is important. I think that's what it would have been for me.
So when we think about like the environment and the people outside of the household that you feel like didn't necessarily see you.
Yeah.
Because maybe you weren't inviting them in or,
Yeah.
But whatever. What is something that, because I'm sure there's other people in this situation now.
Yeah.
What is something that people outside of the household, whether it be teachers or mentors or whatever, what are some statements that they can start to implement in normal conversation that would indicate to those students or children that feel like you, that would show them like, I see you?
What's so funny? As an adult, one of the things that I see on people's emails when they say he and him, it's so funny. Like I don't even have it on my email, which is so damn stupid. But like I should actually have it on my email. Like I look for it and then I don't have it on my own. But when you see that, it does create an environment that like I'm willing. For some strange reason, having pronouns on your email, it just shows that like I'm willing to learn. You know what I mean? It just says that to me. I've never met somebody who have that on their email, that was not willing to just learn or create a more inclusive environment, I think that's like a very small thing that people could do to just show and provide an indicator. I think for me, and I feel bad about this, and I think about this sometimes, like when I was teaching, I definitely had a Black gay student in my classroom, but I didn't know how to connect with him because at that time I wasn't publicly inviting people, so I didn't know, and I didn't know the protocol. Then you got to recognize too that June 2020, federally, the Supreme Court just recognized that you could, be a part of the LGBT community and not get fired for your job. So like coming in, this is my first full-time job. I'm thinking I for sure can't say anything, or I am going to get fired, or I can't say, I can't talk about this aspect of my life or bring any type. I didn't even know any books at that time though, but like if I did, I wouldn't even think about like bringing any books into the classroom, because that would put a marker on my back, And so I just never really. I think about that a lot. Like I was not. For him, I wasn't the teacher that I had wanted. Well, me and him really, really connected, but we just never talked about that. That was like the elephant in a room, right? And I think that would have. I don't know where he's at today. A lot of my kids, thank God, they're successful. So hopefully they graduate. It's sad that like they're graduating from college like this year. I feel like I'm old for sure, but I think that. Oftentimes, Black queer kids don't make it to college. They don't even make it past high school. It's difficult for them because they don't have that representation. So looking back at it, I wish that I was able to like have that conversation. But I feel like having those stories would be, again, going back to that story and storytelling is so important. Yeah.
So when you think about storytelling, because you've said that a few times on this podcast, and you've also talked about like kind of pushing the story forward. I know you're an author, so would love for you to talk about your book and then just talk about, one experience that would define your whole story.
Yeah, that's good. I just became an author. Like when I hear that, I'm like, damn, okay. Because growing up, I also have dyslexia, so I have to slow down my speech too in order to make sure that I'm not, flipping words and that type of thing. So I never thought, and it's funny because when I was a kid, I used to write books as a kid, but I never used to think that was one of the parts of my childhood experience I used to never think that I was going to really do. because I was like, who the hell is going to hire me to write a book or publish my book and have dyslexia? But I consider it to be a gift. And I think that is a part of my journey. My book is called Inside Out Journal. And I mistakenly made this one my first one because my first one was supposed to have been this young adult novel that is taking forever to finish. It's like, oh my God, it's like it's done and it's constant editing. I mean, I've been on the book for it's been a 3-year journey. No, literally. It's been so long. I love it though. I loved the journey, and I feel like the character's name is Alduin. I feel like he'll be ready to introduce himself to the world when he's ready, and I have to be patient about that, and it's difficult. But this book is about how we help people to live their more authentic lives by attaching plant care and self-care together. So it's a 30-day journal where you're able to really engage in just topics, and every day is like a prompt about like who you are as a person. And I do like a mini story about myself. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And one of the things that really kind of fully represents my story was how I even got into plant life and plant care. I have like over 30 plant babies in my house.
Ooh, that's a lot.
I know. I'm trying to get rid of like some.
30 plants.
Yeah. It's like a jungle.
Right.
I literally do. It's so crazy. But my air is really clean in my house. Sure. Like if it's not, there's a problem. But it was during the Charlotte riots and protests. You know what I mean? When we had our own police shooting care, and I was like, I need some form of life into my home because this was just weighing heavy on me. The shooting happened in some of my students' neighborhoods, so I'm thinking about, are they all right? We're just in our second year of our nonprofit, and I'm trying to gain strength for my team, and I recognize that's stupid. I don't need to do that. I need to be as weak as I want to, or considered weak as I want to, and grieve for my own pain, and let's have a community healing moment versus me having to lead everybody like Moses, you know what I mean, on a path to healing. And I think that it really represents my experience because at that moment, it was just less than a year that I had invited my mom into my life and everybody else, and publicly. That was the same year. Actually, that was all in the same year that I had did all of that, because I thought, okay, at this moment, I need to be able to really, really share who I am, because it's going to be important for people to see Black boy joy come out of me and my version of what blackness looked like. And plants helped me do that. I had my first plant, Zakai. He's still living, thank God. He's a ZZ plant. And then now he has so many siblings. And I name them all, and I attach an affirmation to them. And Zakai, I attach authenticity to that plant. And that's what I had wanted to be true about my life. And that's how my whole plant journey started. And now 6 years later, I'm sharing it with people in an Inside Out journal book. But that is a story that helped me to really get to owning who I am.
You ready?
Yeah, this is dope, man.
Uh-oh, what's happening? Say ready.
This is dope,
You're
for
ready.
sure.
Alrighty, so we're going to switch it up a little bit.
Okay.
In the middle of the table, you see a red box.
Yes.
Inside the box are questions. If you could get the red box, pick a question, read it, and answer it.
Okay, perfect. All right. I was trying to figure out what this thing is. I'm not going to cheat, though, because I see. All right. Oh, dang. What is something that you've recently changed your perspective or outlook on? Oh, dang. I would say the insurrection that happened at the like, I used to be like, one of our staff members, the same one that was talking about the investment, looking at the Instagram investment account. I was mad at the white people like attacking like the building and everything like that. And he was like, this is not a problem about us. And I was like, what do you mean? That's why they're attacking it, because we voted and things like that. He said, this is them dealing with eternally how they feel about themselves. And they're just outwardly showing it, and they have to deal with that. And I was like, really? Okay, that's perfect. And that's how I started to actually think about multiple things. And like I shared that earlier today too, that like in order to invite somebody to the table that's not like you got to deal with your internal struggles. And I feel like that, and James Baldwin talks about this, how the only reason how white became white was to drop down their individual identities to be opposition of black. That's the only reason how you got white. You know, it's like I dropped German, I dropped Italian, I dropped Poland, and we're going to all call ourselves white because white is the identity marker for us to say that we're not black. You know, so once white people recognize that whiteness, even in the word whiteness, is anti-black, then you know, they're going to have to really deal with that struggle. But that's the struggle for them to deal with and for them to have the conversation about, rather than me feel attacked and stuff. So that's the perspective and outlook I had.
Man, you
be thinking.
You be thinking. Now, this has been an impressive conversation. I really feel like you're very dynamic in a lot of different areas, very intellectual, but very aware and reflective. And I always say that, but very powerful in your speech and in your representation. And I feel like, you know, I definitely respect your story, your journey, you as a man, you as a black queer leader. And I feel like we have to be more inviting and inclusive in our communities, but also in our conversations so that we can accept, but not only accept everybody, invite everybody, but not only invite everybody, empower everybody as well. So this has been an amazing conversation. I've learned a lot. You know, we're here with Mario, Mr. Inside Out, the black queer leader.
That's hilarious.
This is Around the Way podcast, and we'll see you guys next episode.